Anyhow, then we flew over to China, to Kunming, which is the big place where Chennault became general and all. And the Kunming was, we had the most bombing. That was the one that the Japanese were, because we had air bases there. And that's the place where you had to watch. We had a lot of bombings, period. And the biggest thing you had to be careful there is try to hide wherever you can, you know.
So what was the plan for that? Did you have?
We had slit trenches.
Slit trenches.
That we had made. And unless you were in a building or something where you could, but if you were out there, you could dive into one of those. But there I got a lot of assignments where you had a lot of listening, because there was a lot of not artificial, but a lot of phony messages that they would send. The Japanese would say about some movements and this movements, and you tried to get them to authenticate. Please authenticate. And there's too much static or some rules. So anyhow, a lot of that was trying to decipher what's a true message and what isn't. When I was on one convoy on the Burma Road, that is a road that extends all the way down into Vietnam. At that time it was French Indochina. As a matter of fact, on one of the trips where I was the radio man, we came to a river where we had the trucks were all loaded with gasoline, high octane. And they had one truck at a time on a hand. And these were bamboo rafts, but they were huge bamboos. And the trucks would drive on, they'd go down, they'd take them across. But here we are on the Burma Road, and I could see trucks lined up as far as you could go. And the captain, because he wanted to make that trip in a hurry, faster than anybody else, and he comes to me, he says, Corporal, send this message. He gives me a message that it said delayed at crossing, and explained where it was. And I said, Captain, I'll send the message, but do you realize that we're fair game here? The Japanese are monitoring what we're sending. And if I send this message and tell them, hey, we got a whole bunch of trucks lined up loaded with gasoline at the river, and they can't cross, they can't turn around and go. And then he says, cancel that. And I figured, God, he was so involved on making time, you know. So that was one good message that I was bright enough to say, don't do it. I thought I'd relate one section, Jim, of a houseboy that I had in Kunming. Probably a teenager, probably 16, 17, 18 years old. And he kind of took a liking to me. And first, you know, he was doing my laundry. And so every day as I'd go into the mess hall to have breakfast or lunch, Chen would be there. And instead of using my mess kit, he would use a plate. And he'd go around and get me a helping of whatever it was. And so we became kind of buddies thereafter, no matter where I went, whether it was lunch or breakfast. He was all there to help me. Did I need any help in getting my clothes washed or anything of the sort? So sort of a sidekick. No matter where I went, I could turn around and Chen would be there. We became pretty close. You wouldn't call it friends. He didn't speak English, but he would always smile and nod his head. And I remember the one incident where I got a special order to go up north towards the Burmese border to set up a listening station. Anyhow, nobody else knew about my moving except perhaps my CEO did, my sergeant or my lieutenant. Anyhow, they shipped me up there, flew me up there. I don't know how far, probably 500 or 600 miles, whatever the distance was. I set up a listening station there where it was to monitor what messages came in, what I could pick up on and transmit that back to headquarters. Anyhow, this was what they called sealed orders. So nobody in my the 29 of us in this group, they weren't aware that I was going, but nonetheless, so my job was to listen and to transmit whatever information I gathered. And this was with the Chinese Army and under General Joe Stilwell. He was a general that had charge of all the Chinese troops. Anyhow, I'd been up there, I don't know how long, probably a month or 15 days or 2 months, but I had my own tent. The flaps were down on my tent, but suddenly they were opened up and this young fellow appeared in the opening, and I looked, big smile on his face, and he's calling me Cortez, and here is Chen. Naturally, I was flabbergasted. How could this person know where I was, and how that I'd gone there on sealed orders? So that kind of blew this thing about top secret. So I never did find out how he got there, and I would question him, Chen, how did you get here? Did you hike? He would just nod his head and smile. So much for secret movements within the Army. General Stilwell was one of these generals that he didn't necessarily go with the crowd, even when he was in his early years of training in military school. He was not necessarily, well, I guess caustic, but he certainly spoke up and defended himself. So we ended up calling him Vinegar Joe Stilwell. In the field, he was a soldier's soldier. He would walk around among the Chinese and whatever. We had some English soldiers and also Americans, but he would walk around with the group, never wearing, you wouldn't know who it was, just wearing his regular fatigues, and always concerned about the well-being of the men. He and General Chiang Kai-shek, the leader of China at that time, were not very good friends, because he spoke quite openly about the fact that he felt that too much of this was money. And his wife, one of the Soon sisters, was constantly going to the United States to have different runs to gather money. And the general that in Kunming, Claire Chenault, he was married to one of the Soon sisters, so there was a pretty close relationship between Chenault and Chiang Kai-shek.
Chenault was the Flying Tigers guy,
Yes.
right? I think he was the guy that started that whole...
Yeah, they weren't in the Army. The flyers that I met with the Flying Tigers were mercenaries, but a lot of them were given the opportunity to join the Army or not. So they automatically gave up their P-40 airplanes for the ones they gave them that were P-51s, and they went into the regular Army. But Chenault was pretty much a businessman working in cahoots with Chiang Kai-shek. Yeah, so we were delivering fuel there, and I went hiking through some of the villages, and I came across this village that had a statue in the window, and this is the statue that they had in the window. I was fascinated by it, so I went into the shop and told the manager, the owner, I said, I like that statue in the window, I want to. So he saw that I had my uniform, and he spoke enough English. He said to me, he says, where are you from? I said, oh, I'm from United States of America, California. And his response really startled me when he asked me, he says, ¿Hablas español? In perfect Spanish. And at first, for a moment, I thought, David, am I hearing right? I said, sí, yo hablo español. Well, thereafter, he didn't even try to speak any more English. But I said to him, where did you learn Spanish? Anyhow, he spent 6 or 7 years, building railroads.
Argentina and Bolivia?
Yeah, in that, I don't know that area. All I remember is where did you learn Spanish?
Right.
And he became the foreman on one of these railroad affairs. He said, well, I had to learn, but in the meantime, we're talking in Spanish. Tuve que aprender el español, and I'm still kind of in a debt. Jesus. And of course, some of the customers that he had, people, they're listening, they're not hearing English, they're not hearing Chinese. Who in the hell just got? Anyhow, we talked, and I was just so pleased that. And I asked him, I said, what prompted you to ask me if I spoke Spanish? He said, well, doesn't everybody in California speak Spanish? And then I thought, well, my God, not the USA, but California automatically triggered that.
There you go.
So I immediately sat down that night and wrote a letter to my mother, and to tell her, here I am halfway across the world, around the world. And who am I talking to in China? In Spanish.
Right.
And my mother was so pleased with that. Because we communicated in Spanish.
Well, you had picked up this other little side table that I'll put a picture of.
Oh, the table I picked up in Calcutta.
Right. That was on the way back, or
No,
on the way
that's
over?
when I just got there. Actually, the interesting thing is, Mike and I, this friend of mine, were walking through the town, and the merchant comes out and says, oh, sir, I was looking at the table and says, you want to buy it? No, I don't want to buy a table. We're here. We can't take that stuff with us. And anyhow, he spoke English enough to talk, please sit. And the first thing he said, he offered me tea, and my friend Mike was outside. So I'm sitting there, and he looked at me and he says, I remember, sir, you have very kind eyes. I said, oh, thank you. But anyhow, he wanted some ridiculous amount for the table. I said, look, I don't want to buy the table because I'm here. I've got to go to China,
Yeah.
No, it's just, so we started out at, I think we ended up paying something like 13 or 15 rupees. But he was up at 40 or 50 rupees, and he kept coming down. When I finally agreed, I said, look, I can't send it home. And he said, I will send it home for you.
Wow.
So I thought, okay,
Right.
yeah, anyhow, I paid him his money. And as I left, I thought to myself, well, so much for that. I'm helping somebody out. I never thought I'd see the table. Probably about 3 or 4 months later, I got a letter from him. They said, oh, we got this beautiful package. He actually put the table in a wooden crate.
Right.
And I was so amazed. My mother, oh, what a beautiful little table. And I was just amazed. Because when I walked away with Mike, I said, well, I just donated 14 or 15 rupees. I never thought I'd see it because,
Right.
first of all, I couldn't take it. That's the same time that the fly and the drink, with Mike, that we mentioned. But we had a lot of good experiences.
Yeah.
But the way, I look back afterwards and he's saying to me, oh, sir, you have very kind eyes. Yeah, that's the thing. I'm keeping an eye on you, young fellow. Here's another psychological.